Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 607. My opponent played e4. I went with e6, the French defense. Goes d4, I go d5. And now he plays the unusual move bishop d3, and this is the Schlechter variation. You can see it's pretty rare, but it has a few points. I guess early development of the king side and just going for an open game with the exchange of pawns in the center is what white is looking for. I looked at this later with the chess engine, and it prefers the first choice here, just taking. And if you look at this position, after d takes e4, bishop takes, knight to f6, you get a tempo on the bishop, and the bishop can drop back to f3, or he can throw in this move, bishop to g5. But either way, it seems like a tempo for black. It's black's turn to move in this position with about equal development, but a little more space for white. So it's a way to play, and maybe that's a little better than what I played. Although c5, the way this went, this turned out also to be about equal too. So I made the second choice here, and very typical for the French defense to play with this c5 move undermining the center. And he didn't have to go for the giving me the isolated queen's pawn. He could play with c3 and then later play e5 and get a typical French structure. But he's going for the open position. So he takes, I take, he takes, I take, and we get the isolated queen's pawn position. And this is slightly better for white. I don't really have enough development yet to take advantage of the isolated queen's pawn, so I'm not getting some quick attack going. And white develops with knight f3. That's probably a slight edge to white. Although the chess engine gives black a pretty good score. I mean, not the chess engine. The opening book gives black a good score from this position, but it's only 5 games, so maybe a bit of an anomaly. The chess engine rates knight f3 as slightly favorable to white. Knight e2 it rates as about even. So we've got a typical isolated queen's pawn position here. I just need to develop my pieces, and I should have a good game here. And we get some normal development here. Let's just move forward. This was a long game, actually. And we both got into time trouble at the end, which really had a big influence on the outcome. h3 is a little bit slow, but it doesn't do anything. It's not awful. It keeps my knight out of the g4 square. So he goes bishop f4, and I push on with d4. So d4 is the first decision you can question here, although it is still keeping the game in a range of about even. The chess engine prefers to play with rook e8. Just leave the pawn there, keep your normal development, and allow white, if necessary, to play c3 if he wants to, I guess. The line that the engine gives would continue like this with knight b4, and this is an interesting idea. I think I get in the knight b4 move later under slightly different circumstances, but it's a similar idea. You're harassing this light squared bishop, which is actually a good piece in this structure. And the line goes like this with the trade. So you've gotten rid of that light squared bishop. You still have the isolated queen's pawn. You can still push that forward at some point. He hasn't gotten in the move c3. Although he could play it right here if he wanted to, I guess. Anyway, yeah, maybe c3 is not a good idea. It would allow the knight to hop into d3 in this particular case. But at some point, he could play that to try and restrain my queen's pawn. Anyway, that would be a good position for black. I went with d4. It gives me a little more space, but it becomes a target. We'll see that in the game, but the engine still rates this as about even, so I'm not gonna call that a mistake. This is still it's actually a pretty well played game up through for most of it. Okay, so he develops a piece. Knight d2. I put my rook to e8. All pretty logical. Knight to b3. Now hitting the bishop and putting a little extra pressure on my d pawn. Drop the bishop back. Queen to d2. And now the engine really wants me to play a5. It actually thinks black is better here. I'll just show this line, a5. I actually thought about this briefly to harass this knight here, but I missed a certain point. Let's see. He can block with a4. The point I missed was this move bishop e6, putting pressure on the knight, and cancel that. This diagonal, putting pressure on that knight, and then when he just keeps developing like rook f to e1, which was actually the chess engine's top choice. You can trade off that knight, and it destabilizes this bishop a little bit, although And this pawn, although it's firmly blockaded, it's now a passed pawn and maybe a bit of an asset here. So you've got basically an extra pawn in this position because these two pawns can hold back these three in an endgame. So anyway, that looks like a good way to play. Yeah, I didn't really think of this idea. So make a target of the knight on b3, which doesn't have many good squares to go to. I guess that's the point. Okay, I went with knight d5 here, which is okay, but maybe not the best. He goes bishop g3. Go bishop to e6 now, getting my pieces out. Rook a to d1. Knight d to b4. So now I have this idea of harassing the bishop. And bishop went to e4. And right here I make maybe the first mistake. I play f5, as we saw. Harassing this light-squared bishop can be a good idea, and it does provoke the exchange of the bishop for the knight, which is good for me in general. But in this case, it comes at the cost of weakening my king side. And there's another way to do it. The engine suggests playing bishop to c4. And that's a discovered attack on this bishop. And that provokes, if this bishop drops back, I'll have some pressure on this knight. I think it's playable for it to drop back, but the engine suggests it's best for white to go ahead and do that trade and then defend the knight and unpin it that way. And so I've got the bishop pair, and I haven't taken on any weaknesses on the king side. In the game, I play f5, provoking this exchange. And I have the bishop pair, but in exchange, he's gotten, well, he's going to win the pawn. He just directly wins the d pawn. So, yeah, so let's see. Why doesn't he win the d pawn in the other line? Let's think about this. Bishop to c4. Cancel it. Bishop to c4. Okay, so the other part of the idea of bishop c4 is pinning this knight, so he can't win that pawn. Okay. Anyway, so f5, in addition to weakening the king side, it looks like it results in the loss of this pawn. Although I have compensation, like you see in many queen's pawn positions, isolated queen's pawn positions. You can give up that pawn and still have a decent game. Let's go on. He played bishop takes. I went knight takes. Then he grabbed the pawn. Knight d takes b4. Knight b takes d4. He took this way. I take. He takes. And then now the engine still wants me to play bishop c4 here, and thinks that white is only slightly better. So, meaning I have good compensation for the pawn. After queen f6, the chess engine starts to think that white is better, pretty much just a pawn up for the next phase of the game. So that f5 move basically gives up a pawn. Let's see. There was an interesting point to this line, I think. Bishop to c4, his rook has to move. And, oh yeah, it was this point. I can take the knight. This is not at all obvious that I can take this knight. Queen takes knight. So I guess if the queen takes queen, I have rook takes rook, check. And that will disrupt the defense of the queen there. So he takes here, check. I take back. He takes my queen. I take back. And now he takes here. And I still get this check, but his king runs to safety. And at the end of all this, I can grab a pawn on a2. So that's a longer sequence than I calculated during the game, but kind of interesting, and leads to an even position. So queen f6 is where the balance swings to being in white's favor. But it doesn't stay in white's favor, so we'll continue on. Let's see. He played knight takes bishop here. He takes away my bishop pair from me, but helps develop my rook. Queen to b4, queen to g6. Just some maneuvering here. Bishop to h2. The bishop was hanging because of the pin, so he had to do something about that. Try rook to e4, harassing his queen. The queen went b3 check. King to the corner. Rook to d6. Activating his rook, harassing my queen. Queen to g5. And then queen to a3. So right here is where he gives the advantage back. The chess engine wants to play rook e6 here. It takes, and rook d8. And I get all my pieces out, but Black still has the extra pawn here, and that one pawn edge. After queen a3, actually, it shifts back to being about even again. I can develop my rook and threaten to come in here to the back rank, or the 7th rank, second, I guess it is in this case. He tries queen c3, so he's just kind of maneuvering around with his queen, but not accomplishing a lot. Play h6 to give my king a little lift there, so I don't get mated. He goes king h1, and I went rook to e2, and he brings his queen over to f3. So he's trying to line up for a kingside attack, and I'm trying to put pressure against his king. So both have similar ideas. And at this point, I can just grab a pawn. And so we really have equalized at this point. It's not just that the material is equal, but also there's the attacks are roughly in balance. I have pressure on his king, and he has pressure on mine. He comes in here with bishop f4, harassing my queen. I mean, it feels a little bit difficult to play, I guess, because it's hard to find the best defensive moves when you start to get into time pressure, and maybe that's beginning to take a toll at this point. Queen dropped back to e7, that's still okay. And then he played rook g6. And this move was actually a mistake, although maybe it's not so easy to exploit it, or not so obvious how to exploit it. His best move here, according to the engine, is to drop the rook back to d2. And then I would drop, I now would support my rook e to c8, and this is in the range of even once again. So see, we have kind of evenly balanced forces. So rook g6 is just pushing a little too hard, and I can exploit that by continuing my attack, invading with the queen here. And I guess, well, anyway, this is the line the engine gives. It gives the exchange, and then doubling on the 2nd rank here, and then bishop to e3 to defend the pawn on f2. But we get this trade, and then king up to harass his rook and get away from checks, I guess, on the back rank. Also, this pawn is loose here. He drops back, and I can grab a pawn over here. And now there's a couple of pawns hanging. This pawn is still loose, but this pawn is loose. Anyway, interesting position. But apparently about, let's see, was this the line? This is the line that's favorable for black. Yeah, I guess black is going to win more material than white does. So I stay a pawn up in this line. Okay, so yeah, not so easy to see in a blitz game. I played king h7, harassing his loose rook. Played queen h5, coming over and defending it. And now I'm still doing okay here. I just need to play rook takes f2 right here. I was worried. I mean, he's got 3 pieces lined up on this pawn, so I was worried about this sacrifice. And what you have to see is that that sacrifice only leads to a draw. So if he takes, if I play rook takes f2, as the engine suggests, he can take on h6. I take back. Comes in with the queen, drives my king to g8, and now he really has nothing better than to just go into a perpetual check here. He can take here, but that doesn't really change anything. He's down material, and so he has to go for the perpetual check, and I can't block with my queen because I lose the rook. So anyway, that would lead to a draw if I just played rook takes f2 right here. Instead, I was worried about this sacrifice on h6. I played queen f8 and defends against that. But now he can play rook to d1 and have an advantage. Rook to d1, bring it down to the 2nd rank. So you can see, actually, I put question marks after every move. Basically, every move is a mistake here, maybe because we're having to move a little more quickly, or maybe because the situation is just that complicated. Anyway, his next move, bishop to c1, is a mistake. And I can now take on f2, and actually I'm doing okay here. I've got a pawn up. I've gone from being a pawn down to being a pawn up, and turns out I can defend this, although it looks scary. He tries bishop to d2. I go bishop to e3, just opposing his bishop. Goes bishop to c3, piling up on my pawn here. And now I just need to defend that. I need to play rook to e7. You can see that's the engine suggestion there. And I just stay a pawn up, and it's an okay position for me. Anyway, kind of funny. And I just was moving too quickly here. Well, I was really low on time, and I had kind of touched my bishop, not noticing the bishop was already defending h6, so I didn't really need to worry about h6. I needed to worry about g7 instead. So I played bishop to g5 here, and now he wins with this nice maneuver. Rook takes. Well, it's defended by the queen, but after I take back, he can take my queen off. I still have one last chance to actually throw in this check. Let me see. I skipped over one point here. Let's go back to that. After instead of just taking his rook, this is where I should have thrown in rook to e1 check. I had this idea. I kind of knew that was in the position here. I just didn't play that move at the right time, and by the time I wanted to play it, it was too late. So let's see. Let's go back to bishop c1. He went bishop c1. I went rook takes f2, so that was good. He took back. And then I just did the automatic recapture. So right here, I need to play rook to e1 check, and this is winning for me. So that's why his bishop c1 was a mistake, was because of this rook e1 check winning. His king goes to h2. I can now take, his bishop is hanging. I say the bishop goes to d2. Then I have bishop to g1 check, and he just has no good squares for his king. Here or here, it runs into trouble. There's a queen check from b8 along this diagonal, and actually I have a winning attack at this point. So that would have been the way for me to turn the game around. Instead, I just recaptured. Okay, so now we're in the range of about even once again. Bishop to d2, bishop to e3, bishop to c3, and rook e7 would still keep it around even. No big advantage either way. So instead, bishop g5 loses because of rook g7 check, and after this, I still had, after bishop takes g7, I could have still played on with throwing in that check and then taking the bishop, but I completely had forgotten about his queen being able to take my rook. I was going to play rook to e1 check on the next move, but he took off my rook. So that's how the game ended. Anyway, it was just kind of a time scramble towards the end, but there were still interesting tactics, and shows kind of the nice open positions you get with the isolated queen's pawn. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.